Look, as you've noticed from everything I've said about my career, there's no plan. And that can be disconcerting to people. There's no plan. Like, as long as we enjoy it, as long as we're doing well, as long as there's demand for what we do in a certain city, and it gets us excited, we'll do it.
When I look at your resume, I see, Wharton, Harvard Business, Starwood, Blackstone. That's about as, buttoned up and institutional a world as you can come from. How do you go from that to being the CEO of Stanford, where really the brand is like sort of thumbing your nose at that institution?
It's a great question. I think that thumbing the nose and that part was always inside me, and that's actually somewhat my comfort zone. Just going back, I grew up fairly typical immigrant family. So for my father, it was very much about the academics. It was very much about being buttoned up. So maybe there was some sort of frustrated creative or artist inside as I went through the motions at Wharton and Harvard.
Can you tell me about your family background?
Sure. My father moved to the U.S., I think it was probably 1961. Both of my parents came from the part of India that is now Pakistan. So in that transition, like many families that those generation, they really lost everything. My father's side lost everything in that transition. So he was born and raised in New Delhi. He had 3 older siblings. He was the youngest, and they all worked to allow him to come to the United States. So he did his undergraduate IIT. So he's a very, very smart academic gentleman. Got a full scholarship. The only place that would give him a full scholarship, including a stipend, was in New Brunswick, Canada. So University of New Brunswick. So he moved from New Delhi, India to New Brunswick, Canada on his own. And of course, I heard the story a million times. He came with $21 in his pocket. True story, like many immigrant families. And then when he graduated, he went back to India to find a wife who ended up being my mother, and moved her from Bombay, where she was in art school and having a great time, to Bartlesville, Oklahoma, to work for Phillips Petroleum. So it's a crazy transition of life. And in 1963, I guess that was, maybe 66 by the time I married my mom, Bartlesville was a company town. All the men at that time all wore the same suits, and no joke, my mom got there. And then I think it was we still have this paper, I think it was the Bartlesville Post or Bartlesville Gazette or whatever it was. It said, "Indian man brings wife to Bartlesville." So no joke.
Small town.
And also no joke, my mom cried herself to sleep every night, having had to move away from her family. So stepping back at my age now, looking at what my parents went through to get here, having had an arranged marriage, moving from India to Oklahoma to Ohio in the 70s and to the suburbs of California, quite a transition of life.
What did you do for college? How did you sort of end up in this career path?
So I knew I wanted to leave Diamond Bar. When you think about people growing up in Southern California, it sounds interesting and glamorous and awesome, but Diamond Bar's sort of 30 or so miles east of LA. People know it because of the freeways that run through it. They probably recognize In-N-Out Burger that's there. When my parents moved there in 1973, there was one restaurant at the crossroads of 2 highways, and it was Denny's. And today there's strip malls and pizza places, and it's not the glamour you think of Southern California. So although I had a great upbringing, but I was eager to leave where I was from. And I knew I wanted to come to the East Coast. And I decided at that point I did want to study business. And I also didn't want to fill out that many applications, so I applied early to Wharton and got in.
Did you go there with any expectations, or did you?
I didn't, to be honest. I was out of my depth when I got there. I got there, and the kids that were there were so driven and so smart and so on it, and I felt it was a wake up call, and it took me a little while to adjust. I wanted to go back to California. I had never been in winter like that. I was not competing with kids like that. So I actually applied to transfer to Stanford. I didn't get in, so I was stuck at Wharton, and I ended up absolutely loving it, as one does. It took a little while to get adjusted, but it was an incredible place. I learned a ton. And then as far as this goes, I took a real estate class, and it just made so much sense to me. It just clicked. Somehow the only class I got an A+ in that class, and I ended up getting some award in the real estate department, but for no other reason. Somehow my brain clicked with it, which didn't click with a lot of other subjects, but it certainly clicked with real estate.
What was it about real estate? Like what made sense?
I don't know. It's like super intuitive to me. It was super intuitive. The supply demand dynamics, how things get built, the what moves in the market to get to a point where values exceed construction costs, and that's when you get built. And what Barry used to always talk about, when values are under construction costs, nothing's going to get built, so keep buying stuff at those values. And so I mean, just the economics of it made sense, the logic of it made sense, the tangibility of it made a lot of sense, and then the other components, which I think hotels are the most extreme of, but the things that I loved about the way things look, the way things feel, the architecture, the design, all of it just wrapped in my head in a very logical way. And then when we layered on, I started later in my career, early in my career after college, jumped into the hotel side of things. You layer on the other components, the softer touches, the music and the vibe and the food and the drink and the travel. That whole package was something that somehow fit what I love and what made sense the way my mind works.
And then did you go to Starwood after you graduated?
Oh, so I finished at Wharton and I got 2 offers that I was interested in. One was at Starwood Capital and one was at investment bank Jeffries, which was headquartered in LA at that time. And for whatever reason, the Starwood Capital guys, most of the guys at that time, they really liked me, but I wanted to move back to LA. And I also thought, even though I loved the real estate, maybe it was too specific. And coming out of Wharton, it's like everybody wanted to be an investment banker at that time. And, the mid 90s, that was kind of the thing to do. And so I took the job at Jeffries and moved out to LA. And the Starwood Capital guys was kind of Jeff Dishner, who still works with Barry now, who I told him I was going to go do that. He said, trust me, you're going to get bored of investing. You're not going to like investment banking within a year. But as soon as that happens, give me a call.
Did you work for Rich Handler while you were there?
I did not. Rich, I worked on the investment banking side. Oh, okay. Rich was the head of, capital markets and trading. And I only had one. He was a legend at that time already. Had one experience with him. The first deal we got priced, we used to do a lot of high yield bonds back then, and the investment banking team would work on it. And then it would go to pricing. The day would go to pricing, go to the trading desk, and I got a ring. It's like before the market opens. Apparently, it's a rite of passage. You get a ring on your phone, pick it up, and it says, "Amar, this is Rich Handler." Okay, what's that? What's the yield on it? We're pricing it at this. We're pricing it at this dollar amount. What's the yield on it? Doing your computer. I said, "That's 8.73%." He says, "You better be fucking right, or I'm going to kill you." And he hangs up. I was like, "What was that?" Tell the guys around me, they're like, "Yeah, that's what Rich does." So he was on the other side at that time, and LA was their headquarters. So I never worked directly for him, but I did have that
Were
experience.
You intimidated?
Oh my God, you can't imagine.
Must be hard to concentrate on the rest of the day.
I mean, Jeffries was a wild place. They prided themselves on coming out of the sort of Drexel culture, and Drexel in LA, which was obviously the place for that kind of work, split into 2 places, which was DLJ in LA and Jeffries. And so it was very hard charging. It was kind of the last probably vestige of coming out of that junk bond era. Mm-hmm. And so you saw glimpses of it, and it was a very interesting environment.
And what were you working on at Jeffries?
I was in investment banking, but we also mostly like high yield debt underwriting. So we would raise, it was the old, they used to call junk bonds and high yield bonds. We would raise capital for young companies, restructuring companies, challenged companies, and tap into the capital markets for them. So it was cool because you would meet a lot of entrepreneurial companies, a lot of aggressive business people who were doing interesting things, but who were shut off from the traditional capital markets. So the work was intense, the culture was intense. At that time, people still prided themselves on how hard they worked and how many hours they worked. And we would get into the office we had to be there at 7. And it was oftentimes we'd have all-nighters and work till 2 in the morning. I think about talking to my daughters now, and I tell them those stories as, a father does, and they think I'm dumb. Like, why on earth would you do that? I said, well, I guess we're sitting here now because I did all that.
So now that you're the CEO, and especially in the year 2022, how do you feel about, work-life balance for your employees?
I guess I've learned over the years how important that is. And I respect it a lot. And one thing I did, after I left Starwood. I went back to business school. I went to HBS, and then I went and worked for Blackstone for a bit. Then I went to Starwood to run the W development and W global development. Then I went to Hilton. And I'll tell you, you may have read about it, but when I went to Hilton, I got hit with a major lawsuit from Starwood against me, against a colleague of mine, against they threw the book at us for so trumped up whatever. My view on work and life was totally transformed because I saw what could happen in a big company, and I saw that when there's a crisis situation, no matter how good a job you're doing, no matter how well respected you are, the people at the top, or anybody, runs for the hills, and they put themselves first, they put the company second, and they put you third. And so I think coming out of that experience, I have a ton of respect for people who take the time, take care of themselves, take care of their own lives, and put the company as important, but on equal footing, and put themselves on higher footing, because also you start to realize if you take care of yourself, you'll be better at work. Take care of yourself, you'll be better with your family, better with your friends, better with your colleagues. So I think the work-life balance is really important. I think that's one of the things that this generation is probably ahead of my generation on that understanding.
Let's go back. You left Starwood, you went to Hilton, there was a lawsuit.
Yeah.
But then you came back. Can you talk about what that did for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you the exact chronology. I went from Starwood Capital, where I worked closely. Barry has had an assistant to the chairman every year since me. So I became his assistant for a while. Then in 98, 99, the Asian markets crashed, and we took a trip over there, me and probably 4 partners. I'll never forget, 2 things happened when I got to Thailand. One is we took a break, and we landed in Phuket. I'd never even heard of Phuket. I had no idea what this place was. And where we stayed one night at the Amar in Phuket, which is the first Amman, and my mind was blown. I'd never seen a place or something so beautiful, and that was super inspiring. And I got a call from a guy named Rick Kleeman, who was one of the partners at Starwood, and he said, Barry's super interested in what's happening here, and he wants you guys to stay. We're like, what do you mean stay? How long do you want us to stay? Barry, how long do you want him to stay? Indefinitely. So seriously, we stayed on that trip. We stayed 10 weeks. We looked at each other, we're like, what is going on? We had to buy new clothes and everything. And I ended up staying 2 years. After that, I went back to business school, I went to HBS. And coming out of business school, it was a weird time in 2001. And Barry was spending most of his time at Starwood Hotels. It wasn't the right role. So I went to work for Blackstone. And then Barry ended up leaving Starwood Hotels, back to Starwood Capital. He took Rich with him. So I took on Rich's job in the US of the global development for W. So then, but when Barry left, it became a little weird. Starwood it wasn't that interesting. And they actually wanted to take W and split it up between the brands, so regionalize it. So there was going to be no more W core. So they wanted me to be the head of all North American development for all the hotels, which was like, I had no interest in doing 4 Points and Sheraton and I just didn't want to do that. Mm. And so just at that time, Blackstone was buying Hilton, or Blackstone had just bought Hilton. And I got an offer. They said, you want to come on board, you and Ross Klein, who worked with me at the time, who's head of the brand, and start a new brand and move to LA, and we want to compete and do all this cool stuff. And do you guys take over the luxury business and launch a new boutique brand? And so we said, that sounds pretty cool. So we moved out to LA. We launched this new brand. And within a year, we got hit with this major lawsuit, front page of the Wall Street Journal. There's a lot to hold that long story, but anyway, point being, this trumped up allegations for their own purposes, and I lost everything. I lost all my equity, I lost my salary, I lost literally everything.
At Starwood?
At Hilton. Oh. At Hilton. I was living in LA, 2 young kids, and they basically, the U.S. Attorney's Office got involved to look into this, and they let everyone go. 21 people that were on our team fend for themselves. I had to get my own lawyer, had to do everything. Anyway, it all worked out well in the end. But I moved back to New York. I had literally left with nothing at all, not even my reputation.
Was the conflict with Barry? Was it?
No, Barry was gone. Barry was gone. My relationship with Barry was always fine. He was at Starwood Capital. This was the new management.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is the new management there. And they really, I think, desperately didn't want Hilton to compete with W, which I understand. So anyway, I came back to New York and I got a call from Andre Balazs, who was the founder of Standard. And I'd met him once on a plane before. He said, "Can we have lunch?" I said, "Yeah." And it was still while the lawsuit stuff was going on. He was really sweet. He said, "I've talked to a lot of people in the industry. And I think Standard has a lot of potential to be a global brand. And I've heard that you're the person that we would work well together to make it a global brand." I said, "I don't know if I want to go back into this." And he was quite convincing. He said, "Okay, let's do it." So I came on board at Standard at the end of
What did he say that convinced you?
He's a very convincing guy. He's charming and convincing, and I believed in the potential of what we could do together. And so I came on board end of 2010, and we did a bunch of stuff together. And we worked for him for a couple of years, and then realized it wasn't going to work like that. We had a good relationship, but it was his company, and we needed to build. If we really wanted to do it, we needed to build sales and revenue management and technology, and you can't just build cool stuff and hope it works all around the world. It doesn't work like that. So, and it was his company, and the investment wasn't there to build that infrastructure. And he did business differently than I do business. So I thought it was better that we leave on good terms than just continue that way. So I left beginning of 2013, and I did a bunch of random stuff. I opened some restaurants in New York, Mexican restaurants, with a great young chef called Empeon. And then me and a partner from Blackstone, we bought Papaya King, the hot dog business. We did a whole bunch of random stuff. But then Andre came back to me and he said, "Look, I'm ready to I'm ready to move on with my life in a certain way. Do you want to come and be the CEO of the company and take it on?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do that, but it's got to work a different way. It's still your company. We need to raise outside capital. I need to be in control, and you need to be bought down to a minority position." And he said, "Do you think you can do that?" I said, "I don't know, I think so." And so in 2013, we raised a bunch of money from some private individuals and bought Andre down to a minority position. And I took over at that time.
It's got to be hard, in hospitality and nightlife where the job requirements are jet setting, late night parties and stuff like that. Is that working for you? Is that life?
It's the way I would think about it is I'm in it, but I'm not of it, if that makes any sense. I've never been deep in that world as it being my world. I'm deep in it because I love creating stuff that people like. I love creating hotels that people like, restaurants, nightlife. I love other people enjoying it. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy it, but it's not my thing. So I like the art of it. I like the culture of it. I like the ability to do it. I like watching people get out of it. I feel like it's a little like creating it's creating a piece of art that you enjoy watching people enjoy it, and you enjoy the art of creating it, but not necessarily yourself enjoying that piece of art.
What about, creating art and, hospitality? Is it changing now with Gen Z? How do you...
My view is that, and if we create, if the team creates stuff that we really love, genuinely, and we have people that are so deep in the music scene on our team, so deep in the culinary scene, so deep in the cocktail scene, in the art scene, like Jen, in the fashion scene, and if they love what we're creating, that's good enough for us. And if they love it, I think other people will love it. And so far, that's how we've operated. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what the next generation wants. I think about what we love. Now, the way I do think about it is making sure we do hire people from that generation so they can say what they love, and then we'll create it. But they become part of the team, infused with the Standard culture. So it's an internal reflection on things that we love to create, with an expectation that if we're that passionate about it, other people will get it and enjoy it as well.
You're doing branded condos now. Do you ever worry about taking that cachet that you've built and sort of handing it over to someone else?
No, because I'll tell you, even when we go into the residences or condos that we're doing, they're coming from the same spirit in the same place. So I'll tell you the 3 places we've done condos or residences are the 3 places that I personally would want to live. So we're doing them in Lisbon, Miami, and Austin. And it starts from not someone saying, hey, would you do a branded residence here? It's like, no, we love this market. We could see why we would want to live in this market. We appreciate it. When I go to Miami, I stay at the Standard. I don't want to leave. It's that good. It's that the weather is that good. The people are that good. The food is that good. I don't want to leave. So if you think about it from that lens, if I don't want to leave, then the logic of having a residence of a Standard is totally logical.
I just wonder, so much of it is out of your control. You think, like, you look at 432 Park Avenue.
Yeah.
You know, what if you had a branded building and something completely out of your control, like shoddy construction?
So most hotel companies, including ours, don't own the real estate, as you know, even in our hotels, whether it be Four Seasons or Ritz-Carlton or Amar or Accor, whoever. We don't. So we've always had to deal with the dynamic of we have control over certain things, we don't have control over other things. Even in the hotels, leave aside the residences, and you guys write about this a lot in The Real Deal, hotel owners, the real estate owners, that's not us. So every day we deal with the dynamic of things that we're in control of and things we're not in control of. So I think the same applies to the residences. And the first lesson for our business, because we're so-called asset light and don't own our real estate, in most times in real estate, you say it's location, location, location. Quite honestly, for us, it's partner, partner, partner. GAW has been a great partner. They've been supportive all throughout the crisis. We separate ourselves from those real estate issues. That's between them and their lenders and their banks, and we certainly trust them to handle it as they see fit. From a purely management and contractual perspective, we have what's called a non-disturbance agreement. So whatever happens in that matter, the Standard will still be there. Mm-hmm. So that's good. But having said that, GAW's been a great partner, and we trust that they'll absolutely work it out.
Do you play anything now to relax? Or?
I ride my Peloton bike and do yoga.
Are you still on the board of Peloton?
I was on the board very early on. I was a seed investor. In full disclosure, John Foley's my best friend from business school. So I was a seed investor, and I was on the board for a period of time.
What do you think of the struggles that they're going through now?
Obviously, as I said, I'm probably biased because I'm John's friend, but I don't think there's any tech company that I can think of in the world that every day makes people healthier, that makes people feel better about themselves. And I think it's a bum rap on what's going on right now in terms of having revolutionized and created what they created from scratch. And certainly there are missteps along the way. And if you're in the arena, if you're a CEO, you make judgment calls, and not all of them were perfect. And then the pandemic hit, and it exploded. And so they had to go along with that. And they couldn't get bikes fast enough to people, so they invested in manufacturing. And so obviously in retrospect, you can see that they may be overinvested. And right now, the media loves to jump on the situation and the turmoil. But I always put it in perspective because I've been involved with it or seen it so long. You zoom out, it's just absolutely incredible what they built. And I think I have every confidence it's going to be going to the next level.
I think I got through everything, but if I have any follow-ups, I can say.
Yeah, the only other thing I would mention, I think it's worth noting, if you don't mind, that I changed my role. So I moved from CEO to the executive chairman. Mm-hmm. And Amber Asher, she was our general counsel for 7 years and the president of the company for 3 years. She's taken on the role of CEO.
What was the deciding factor, or what made you realize that now was the time for you to change roles?
I think a couple things. I think as everybody coming out of COVID, you think about what the next phase looks like. And to open 15 hotels around the world, maybe more in the next 5 years, would necessitate me being on a plane the entire time. And I've done that for a long time, and it's exhausting. And I have 2 teenage daughters at home. We're not going to be at home that much longer.
What was the deciding factor, or what made you realize that now was the time for you to change roles?
I think a couple things. I think as everybody coming out of COVID, you think about what the next phase looks like. And to open 15 hotels around the world, maybe more in the next 5 years, would necessitate me being on a plane the entire time. And I've done that for a long time, and it's exhausting. and I have 2 teenage daughters at home. We're not going to be at home that much longer.
Do you have a checklist for what you want to do with your free time then?
No, I think you don't. What I also know is you don't know truly what you want to do till you get a little bit of distance. So I read a ton. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I learn, and then only then my mind will open up to what's next. It'll be connected to this. I'm still deeply involved in this, but I think how this business ultimately gets transformed for the next 20 years, I think this industry gets transformed. I think I'd like to figure that out, but I'm not there yet.